And then we're going to
Perfect.
figure, we have no idea what the levels are. So I'm going to try to listen to it,
Theoretically.
and you're going to hear an echo here for a second. Maybe, if it ever starts. Or do you want to listen to it? Then you won't get an echo. Oh, here it goes.
Here it goes. Levels, 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 levels.
I think we're good.
Should you ever want to check your levels, go to levels.fyi. I mean, that's only if you want to check your salary level. Totally different thing.
We're close enough. All right.
Close counts.
Oh, can I send a link to? Okay, that has to be muted because yes, there. All right, Scott. One of these days, maybe this will actually be smooth. Like the whole beginning of our stream ends up all kinds of wacky because we have to figure out all our settings every time.
I blame my producer because my settings don't change.
Here, I'm gonna take a picture, so I have it. This is assuming I remember it. I have a
Put
picture
it
of
in the
my
playbook.
levels and my faders to see all the things. Yes. So, Scott, we needed something to do instead of watching radar maps for hurricanes. So we decided we should talk about Microsoft Dev Box today.
Absolutely. DevBox, all the things.
Especially,
Which, when you brought this up, I was a little confused about this just because there's the whole kind of spectrum of uh, cloud PC, DevBox, lab services, virtual machines. There's just all these things that exist out there in Azure land today. So I was potentially a little bit yeah, just a little confused. And when they announced this one, because it's not called Azure Dev Box, it's called Microsoft Dev Box. I thought it
right.
was a Microsoft 365-ish thing, kind of like Cloud PC would be. Like, hey, let's go ahead and spin this up through the M365 side of things. But then you started pointing me to some documentation and things to look at. And I was like, oh, this is an Azure service. Why is it called Microsoft DevBox? Are we back to Microsoft Azure? Like, it's all just
Well,
very strange to me.
but in theory, everything's going to Microsoft, right? We used to have Azure Sentinel. That's now Microsoft Sentinel. We used to have something else that used to be Azure. That's now Microsoft.
Maybe I'm biased because I work in a division called Azure Core, where we have things like Azure Compute and Azure Networking and Azure Storage. So maybe I'm bringing some of that with me, but
I
I don't know.
no,
I,
I
I was
think
I was a little confused by branding strikes again.
yeah, I think Microsoft marketing just gets bored and decides that they need to flip names around. Um, like even the whole Office 365, Microsoft 365 thing, they're like Office 365 is no Microsoft 365, but only if you're in business, not if you're an enterprise. I, you've got me. Anyways, enough about
Anyways, why
Microsoft
don't we get
marketing.
into it? So
Okay,
tell
so
tell me what
documentation.
DevBox
Oh,
preview is.
DevBox. So DevBox preview is in theory, and we'll jump over here because you have the documentation up, so I can read your documentation. But yeah, Microsoft DevBox is essentially a service that allows you to go create certain VMs that would be pre-configured for a project. So let's say in this case, Scott, you're working on a web application, and maybe there's certain configuration settings you need, certain software you need installed. You can go create a DevBox project, a project DevBox. As we go through this, you'll kind of see how it all works. So that as you go work on that web app, you can spin up a VM that is pre-configured with whatever settings you may need for that project. And then maybe once you're done with that, you can spin it down or stop it and jump over to a different project dev box. So it allows you to create a whole bunch of VMs that would be pre-configured in a certain way, and then spin those up, spin them down as you need them as you move between different projects. And you can even have like project manager of your dev box projects that have permissions to go in and create new pools and see these pools and manage them all. I hope
Gotcha.
that
So
kind of
so when
made
we looked
sense.
at yeah, so when we looked at lab plans and lab services last time, very similar concepts. Create a virtual machine that has a pre-configured set of software or artifacts that reside on it. Make that I guess virtual machine or pool of virtual machines available to a set of users, and then push it out. But it looks like this is maybe just geared towards a little bit of a different audience, like well, with the name DevBox, devs, but also QA folks, or really anybody who maybe just kind of would find this helpful day to day, and maybe they don't need like the full on power of AVD, which it looks like just perusing the documentation off top, it's like before you even go to the getting started stuff, it's got very similar concepts in there. Like, hey, let's have a pool of virtual machines that are going to be available to a subset of folks that they'll be able to RDP into to go ahead and interact with. So I'm kind of interested to see how this one manifests versus something like lab plans and lab services versus native AVD versus cloud PCs and kind of just the M365 side of things.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we looked at lab services in the last video when we walked through all of yours. The nice thing about this environment that we'll look at today, I actually have a Windows 365 Cloud PC environment stood up. I have an AVD environment stood up, and I did do a little bit of the Martha Stewart thing, and I do have a dev box already configured because it can take 60 to 90 minutes, as we'll see, to create one after you go configure all the services. So we'll walk
Gotcha.
through configuring all the services, but then when it's time to like go remote into one and see how it manifests itself with all those other ones, we can hop over to a pre-configured environment where I created one already. Um,
Very cool.
so we
Hopefully
can
this works
see
out a
how
little bit
these
better than
all,
lab services.
yeah, exactly. Hopefully we can see these all lined up together. But you are absolutely correct in that, I mean, Cloud PC, DevBox, AVD, technically the way they all look and function, and even some of the endpoints, all of these other services are really just built on AVD. They're all very similar in that regard.
Makes sense.
So, should we go spin one of these up? Was there anything else you wanted to point out in the documentation? I know I've glanced through it. I looked through it when I stood this up. Um, to me, there wasn't a whole lot in the documentation, and there were either even some things missing from the documentation that I wanted answers to and couldn't really find.
I'd be shocked. I don't think there's a whole ton here, right? Like most remote hosting services, so it looks like it supports connectivity over virtual networks. Like that's all good. You'll have to have that VNet and subnet predefined. That all makes sense. Looks like it supports AD join, which is perfect. Like that's not any different than Cloud PC or what's out there today. Network connections. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think this all looks pretty straightforward. Why don't we
permissions.
just hop right in and start playing around with it?
All right. So let's jump over to my desktop, and I am in my Azure environment here. So the first thing I did, again, because I like to play with this without reading the documentation, is I went into the Azure portal and I was like, ooh, let's go create, not a dev box, let's go create a dev box. And it is not actually dev box. Dev Center shows up, project and network connection. Dev Center is, I thought, where I wanted to start. So if I go in to Dev Center, this is where you can see you manage your image, your SKUs, templates, networks, identities, all of that type of stuff. So
Hmm.
you need a Dev Center for your Dev Box. This is an umbrella service. This is that very top level. Um, that you still need this. You still need to start here, but I will. I ran into a problem, and I'm going to walk you through what I did just so you can kind of see what's going on. So we'll go into my demo subscription. I have an Azure Dev Box resource group, and we can call this to the cloud demo. Pick your region, and kind of like lab services, there's nothing really to this. It's the basics, tags, we're not going to do those, and create. And we have a new dev center. Uh, it goes out and starts building out this shell for our dev boxes. And in my experience, this all went pretty quickly to go deploy all these resources, just because it really doesn't create much there. Um,
That's not too bad. It looks like a call to the resource provider, spins up kind of whatever the parent resource is, and then you're on proxy resources or managed resources underneath it.
yeah, and all of this too is free. So there's no cost associated with DevBox. It's just the cost of the VMs, from what I could tell. And naturally, this is going to be super pokey now because we're demoing it live, right?
100%.
Yeah,
That's the way
it
these
was
things
nice and
go.
quick before. So it goes and creates this dev center. It goes and creates this dev center.
It spins, and it creates a
Spins
dev
some
center.
more. Apparently,
Yeah,
EC2 is
so
not the
this is
place to go.
interesting. I just pulled up the billing stuff just because you mentioned it.
Here, I'll jump over to it
So
while I'm deploying in progress. There you go.
yeah, yeah. So there's two components to this. One being the compute, and the other being the storage, which makes sense because if you shut a pooled VM down, you still want to uh, persist the disk behind it.
Right.
So you're going to have like that little bit of storage, whatever it happens to be, 256 gigs could be a terabit, whatever you happen to do. So it's interesting here. If you go with the smaller VMs, they're 99 cents per hour. But if you do a larger VM, while it's during preview, your first 15 hours per month are free.
Oh, that's
Uh,
interesting. I missed that when I was looking at the pricing or skimming it
Yeah.
earlier.
Limited time during preview. If you come back and watch this later and you go, "Oh my gosh, they're not free anymore." Like I don't know, right? Like this is clearly just uh, during a preview kind of thing. So interestingly enough, if you think you're only going to run it for 15 hours, why not just do the bigger one?
Right.
And then
Well,
go ahead and take it for free. Same thing with the storage sizing. If you look at the disk sizing, 256, 512, or do the terabit, same thing. You get 365 hours free during preview per month for the 512 gig disk to put that up there. So active usage is only when you're running. Storage is still there when you're not running it. That makes sense. And ooh, this is interesting. Each user must be licensed for Windows 11 Enterprise or Windows 10 Enterprise, Endpoint Manager, and Active Directory P1. So bring your own licensing and make sure it's correct.
yeah, exactly. And this is one advantage, at least, that I saw with DevBox over the Windows 365, the Cloud PC, because we were comparing those. Cloud PC is a fixed price per month. Um, for like the 4 gig or 4 core 16 gig that you're showing there at 99 cents per hour, I think it's a ballpark of $60 a month for Windows Cloud or the Windows 365, the Cloud PC, no matter how much you use it, and you still have those same licensing requirements. So the dev box is nice in that, well, it may not always be available in that you can just click to log into it. If you are turning it on, shutting it down, and only kind of booting it up when you need it, it could potentially be cheaper than Cloud PC.
Yeah. Very different use cases, though. One is geared towards information workers. So, I'm gonna have
Right.
Outlook and Teams and Word and PowerPoint, Excel, all those kinds of things on my cloud PC. On a dev box, like if I'm somebody who's doing, say, QA around a development solution, I might only ever spin it up to hop on, do a git pull, get the latest build, and then run through whatever tests I have in front of me, and then I'm gonna shut it down. So I think just from a, hey, these have different use cases kind of thing, like that all makes sense to me.
Yep. And this is one I'd probably use more. I use my Windows 365 Cloud PC for a lot of PowerShell stuff, um, for different clients when I can't do my PowerShell on my Mac. So this dev box for me, it's like go spin it up when I need to write some PowerShell. May actually make sense for me to transition more to this. We'll have to see. But that's the power of the dev box. I could go create images that have all my PowerShell stuff set up. Um, if I'm doing PowerShell stuff, or maybe it has all the CLI stuff. If I'm doing Bash, you get a bunch of different options there. But
Yep,
our Dev Center
makes sense.
provisioned, so we can go to our resource. This is where I land, or where you land after you create it. So you have your overview, activity log. This is all pretty standard. Same thing with identity and properties. And then you have your dev box configuration. Uh, Networking, compute galleries, dev boxes. And I started just going from left to right across here. So I started with a dev box definition. We're going to come back to that. Next, I went to add network connections. And you go
Kind of
here,
need a network connection first, don't you?
right? That was, I think you do. I can't remember if that was a setting in there, but I got here and I'm like, oh, great. I just have to go add a network connection. I have one here that you can see as test dev box. But guess what happened the first time I jumped in here? I had
Yep.
no network connection. I
Nothing.
couldn't
Yeah.
create one. I thought add would let me create one. You actually need to go into your Azure resources and create a network connection first. Um, so we can jump back to home, create a resource, and you may have noticed when I searched for DevBox, these other ones as project and network connection popped up. Network connection is a DevBox network connection. So this
So
is
that was
a
gonna be one of my
new,
questions. That's not all that add a thing, it's not showing all of your virtual networks and all the subnets within them. Like, this is some other thing that's been bound to a VNet and a subnet.
yeah, and this is really, it, it's an interesting resource, I guess, that you go create a network connection, but it's really just storing configuration information. So it stores Azure Active Directory join type, it stores the VNet that you connect to for these dev boxes to use when they're connecting. So I don't know that it's so much a resource, it's almost like a template or a config setting to a certain extent. Because if you go in and we'll go do a new network connection for this new dev box. I can go pick my resource again. We'll do our demo resource subscription. We will do our Azure Dev Box resource group, and we can do the to the cloud network. And this is where we could do either Azure Active Directory, or if you are doing that hybrid DC join, you could do a hybrid one. Hybrid, you have to go throw in all your domain server stuff. I don't have a domain server, but now I just go pick a virtual network. So I can go pick this demo's VNet and pick the subnet on that network. So this gives you the option to create multiple network configurations. So if for different projects, maybe you have different VNets that you connect to for dev or for QA, or different web applications have different networks that the SQL servers are on, any of that, you can go set up multiple network connections that you can use as you define these dev boxes.
Yeah, it's interesting to have the kinda the switch there too for AD join or being able to do hybrid join
Yeah,
and kinda defining which way you're going to go.
yep. So just like DevBox, nothing else there. And it goes in and creates a network connection. And this will
And
go
and
out.
even for that flow, just to, like, be super clear, you
Yep.
had to pre-create the VNet and the subnet. There still wasn't an opportunity to create those within the network connection resource. Like, you had so
Right.
you have to have the groundwork in place. Like, theoretically, you could create the network connection before you create the dev center if it's a separate resource like that, but you no matter what, you have to create the VNet first.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I kind of skipped over that because I guess in my head is you're creating a dev box to go work on some resources. In theory, you probably already have those resources in Azure and they're already sitting on a VNet. And you want to be able to go essentially join these dev boxes to the VNet where your applications and servers and all of that, in theory, are already living.
Yeah, maybe I'm thinking of it from the lens of like you're developing a brand new app, or maybe you're trying like a new model for security and deployments. So, say you're developing an application that has dependencies on Azure Web Apps and storage and Azure SQL.
Yep.
Like, you might go and do things like private endpoints with all of those and spin those up. And now you're going to need to say, hey, for my new developer, QA engineer, whatever they happen to be, like this resource who's coming on, who's going to be interacting with these Azure resources, like this kind of composed solution, they're going to need connectivity to that solution. So you might even come through and do like a VNet peering thing, or have an additional subnet in a VNet that's dedicated just to those dev boxes so that they can talk to those resources.
Yeah. So there is all of that stuff, I guess, to think
Yeah,
about.
you're gonna have to think about it basically.
Yeah. Um, so from here, you have network connections, edit access to who can delegate permissions to utilize this network. When I set this up, I did not do anything with access or permissions here. I just deployed the network connection. Um, so now if I would go back and look at my, well, let's go
Your
back
dev
here.
center. Yep.
I'm actually going to go back and look at my resource group, this demo resource subscription. You'll see that as we start resource groups, my Azure Dev Box, like this is the test ones I created earlier. Here I now have my to the cloud dev center. I have my network connections. Here's that other network connection we saw earlier. So I
Mhm.
can start using all of these other ones within my demo environment. So now that I created a network connection, I actually have to add it to this dev center. So I can go in here. We have our to the cloud network. It does run some checks. So it is possible, and this was one thing that was lacking in the documentation. It says it goes and runs checks and makes sure it can be used or not. If it can't be used, you'll have an error and you won't be able to use it. I don't know what it's checking for. Um, you can add it before it actually checks, and you'll just see it sits here and it continues to run the checks. At some point in time, hopefully this turns green. It's
Well,
kind of one of
that's
those,
helpful. That's what you want. At
right?
some point in time, we hope this all works out.
It all works out. But we could go in and add other networks if within this whole dev center you do want to have multiple networks, and you want to use them. You would have to go through and do add again, and we could add like our test dev center one. So now that we have our network, we also have, let's go to one more thing, Azure Compute Galleries. I don't have any configured. If you wanted your own custom images here, you could go add a custom compute gallery, upload your own custom images, and take advantage of those images when you create these definitions for your dev box as well.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't do that. I went straight to dev box definitions.
And these are just pre-configured, kinda ready to go machines that have a baseline configuration?
Yeah, so now we'll go create those, and this could be our uh, to the cloud dev box one. Uh, Images, I found this interesting. It goes back to the licensing thing you said. By default, you can't use any server images. I know some devs, based on what they're doing, actually use a server image.
Mhm. Yep.
So if you want to go a Windows Server route, you better go create your own custom image. Um, you really just have Windows 10, 11, and then these different versions, and whether you want the Microsoft 365 apps. Again, this was a little odd to me too, going back to this is not geared toward an information worker. I don't know why I'd want the Microsoft 365 apps unless I'm developing a Microsoft 365 application.
I can see wanting those there. So I know when it comes to things like my admin workstation, I very much appreciate the ability to have Teams on it and log into Teams in case I need to do a screen share from that,
Okay.
just to be able to come across. Or there are certain activities, like depending on like some of the systems I work with, have copious logs, like where they'll just keep coming out and out and out, and those will
Got
go
it.
into something like a CSV, and I might want to take some of those and put them into Excel where I can do filtering, sorting, all those kinds of things. Like, so I can see that kind of use case there beyond just, hey, I'm going to do some type of Office app development. But if you are doing Office app development, like, I guess kind of cool that it can bootstrap and get you there. And then maybe you have to go onto whatever release train you want to actually pull down bits. Like, say you're working with like, some type of like preview bits or something like that to do validation.
Yep. Image version, so a lot like we saw with labs, is if you want to just always be on the latest, you can, or you can go pick a specific version. So if you're doing,
But that's a version that Microsoft has published, like,
this is a version that
so
Microsoft has, but if you did have
yeah,
your own gallery, your own image gallery, and you publish multiple versions, you would be able to specify which version from there.
yeah. So did you see a place in the documentation where it tells you what's different between so say Microsoft releases 2.0, are they gonna tell you what's different between 2.0 and
2.0 and
1.0,
1.0.
or you just
I did not see that. I don't know if that's in the documentation or not.
if you
Um,
just click the little I there, does it give you, for, like, information? Does it give you a link or nope?
automatically update to the latest, or select a specific version to be used for all dev boxes in the pool.
Yeah, so maybe you have to be really careful there, right? If you're validating a solution and you're saying like, "Hey, this is gonna be the blessed one to move forward with," then maybe you wanna go
Right.
with a specific
You want to be
version
on
and
a
then
specific
lock
version.
yourself to that moving forward so you can always go to the next one when it comes out and revalidate.
But I don't know that they ever, at least the image gallery, I've never seen anything other than 1.0. Like
I
even
don't
if
know.
you go to an older one like the 2020 H2, like it's always
It's
just latest in one.
I wonder if that's maybe, just as an aside, if that's even just like a UI thing here, because there's definitely multiple images of those behind the scenes. Like when you go through the portal and you deploy like a Windows Server VM, it's always giving you the latest version, but you can absolutely step back to previous versions of that, say through like an ARM template deployment or a CLI, something like that, if you
Got
want
it.
to.
Maybe that is something then with the preview or the UI. Um,
Yep. So
um,
you want to go with the beefy one,
right,
because
because it's
go
free.
with the bigger, because it's free
So, yep, and
during preview.
this is definitely different. This is where it feels more cloud PC-ish and less Azure VM-ish, is that you're locked into these couple options.
Oh, do the 512. It's free.
Oh, the 512 was free. I thought the 1024 was free.
No, no,
Okay,
it's the 512. You gotta get yourself in that right config.
512. So, create my dev box definition. Great. I can go create this definition. Again, this is going to go, it pops up here pretty quick. And then it's just in here and it does some verification here with the pending, with the networking. So, networking, you can see past, dev box definitions. This is still pending. But now that I've started to create definitions, I actually have to go create the project that certain definitions belong to. So
Mhm.
we're creating two here. There's a lot of use cases where you may not necessarily need to have um, multiple dev centers. You can put a lot of projects and definitions and all of that within a single uh, dev center. So that all passed too.
So is a project analogous to a pool then? Or what I would
It
think of as like the pooled resource where VMs are deployed into?
Yes. So if we go now create a project, we'll go back once more and go to not my prod one, but my demos. my Azure Dev Boxes. Now I can select the Dev Center. So I have my Martha Stewart Test Dev Center up here, my
Yep.
new To the Cloud Dev Center, and this one still has to be no spaces, I believe. Yeah. And then description, we can do To the Cloud. Sorry, we'll stick with my. So this was not the pools. This is just another container. You create lots of containers when you do this,
It's like proxy resources for proxy resources for
right?
proxy
So it's like
resources.
next tags, next review, and create. Again, nothing much to do there. We go create our new project now. And hopefully, once again, this project spins up pretty quickly. But the project level is where you can actually go start configuring permissions to what they have access to. So a project might be a web app, maybe a project is a Office 365 add-in. It can be where you want to start assigning access and creating those dev pools. So
Yeah, this feels like it's heavy on the front end for configuration, but like you said, it's probably something you only do occasionally, like once it's set up. You might come back and add a new project to an existing dev center, or you might come back and add a new image type, validate a new image type, whatever that happens to be.
yeah. So first thing I did was go in and edit access and add role assignments. So there are a couple roles here. Your DevBox user. This allows a user to go select a DevBox, provision a DevBox for themselves, and get access to it. The project admin is the one that can actually go in to like a project. So an admin could come into this project and actually add new definitions or create new pools or manage the settings within the project that we're in now. And this is documented in terms of what users can do with those two different levels or what the project admin can do. So I'm going to go give myself access to this, select me, review and assign, review and assign. So I'm a user now in my To the Cloud demo project. The next thing I need is a pool. So this is where now I can go set up different pools of dev boxes where I can go create, and this is going to be my To the Cloud demo pool 1. And these definitions now are the definitions that I created within this dev center. So our DevBox 1. You could have DevBox 2,
Mhm.
3, 4 in here. And this is, again, if you have multiple connections, you can kind of mix and match and take this particular configuration of the DevBox goes on this particular network. So you can play with how you want those two things configured and connected. Again, just basic user that creates it. They have local admin rights, or are they just a standard user? Nothing too fancy there. And then you do have to confirm. So you don't even have an option. Going back to that whole hybrid benefit license, if you don't have a license, you can't create this. There's no option to purchase one. Yes, you have one. Now we can go create that DevBox pool. So this goes out, starts creating that pool of those resources. No errors found. I have my new pool. And that is all there is to the actual configuration of it. There's really no other settings or anything else you can do. Once you've gotten to this point, you'll have this link, DevBox Developer Portal, and this is the link that you would actually give to your end users to go in and start accessing them. So devbox.microsoft.com. Apparently, it
You
doesn't
would
think
think
I'm
they would just come
stupid.
into the portal. Like, why have another portal for a portal kind of thing? But
Well, so this gets even more bizarre. Just wait. This goes back
just
to
wait, there's
just wait.
more.
There's more. This goes back to your other question about how all of these things integrate in together. Um, Let me go sign in with my DevBox portal. So this is, you can actually see, all of a sudden my test project shows up as well. Where I
This
can open in
this
the
looks
browser,
like our friend Lab Services and all its annoying
right?
quirks.
In Windows 365. This is going to my Martha Stewart. Apparently it has not refreshed yet with the name of my other with my other options. But I can go in now as a developer and say this is for my other project. Oh, no
Mhm.
spaces. My other
You
project.
tried.
It's going to let me pick which project I am working on. So, test project one, I actually had two different pools available. These look the same, but this could be different VMs. Maybe it's from
Mhm.
different images.
So you
Um,
have to kind of know that or be guided into
right,
that based on whoever provisioned the back end kinda Azure resources, I guess, which is potentially a view that's masked from you if you don't have access to the Azure portal.
right. Or make sure that you name them better than like Dev Test Pool 1 and Dev Test Pool 2. This could be based on like dev or QA or
Mhm.
production, something like
Yep.
that. Um, so yeah, and then my test project two had another pool. And then this is where you can see it takes anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes to go in and create these resources. So once you've made your appropriate selections, it's just click create, and I can go create another one of these. We'll go in there, click
So that's kind
create.
of a crazy amount of time because at this point you haven't it's not like you went and defined a bunch of post configuration steps or anything that had to happen. Like you haven't injected additional artifacts,
Right.
gone and scripted out, hey, do this git pull, install Visual Studio, install like a JDE, and you just haven't done that. So what is it spending 90 minutes on? Like at this point, it's just a raw VM and a raw VM deployment. That's like a 5-minute exercise. And even if
Yeah.
it was a customized image, you would have customized it through the compute gallery anyway. Like it would have been, it's like Ron Popeil set it and forget it. It's already done. Like what is taking 90 minutes?
Yeah,
That's kind of
I
crazy.
don't know if they have just a small queue to spin these up or if it has something to do with registering it with the endpoint. I have absolutely no idea.
Is it and it looks like it was 90 minutes even if you already had a pool initialized. Like I could see like, hey, there's actually like a backend resource here, like some type of maybe like on behalf of managed masked resource that you don't see, like an AVD instance. And great, now you're at the point where we've got to go spin up AVD the first time and turn it on and actually create a pool and get it configured and get it all joined and ready to go. But that doesn't seem to be this. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe I'm
I
missing
don't know
something there.
either. Um, and now you can see I just refreshed. We also have our to the cloud demo. So I could go in here. We just had the one box configured. Um, this could be our to the cloud demo dev, and it goes in and creates this. So this is the nice thing. Windows Cloud PC, I can't have multiple SKUs and different configurations. I get
Yep.
one, I only have it. Same thing with Lab PC or even doing Azure Virtual Desktop. Like it's hard to get this type of flexibility where I can go spin up multiple VMs for myself and have this interface for them. And then within here, I can manage them. So I have a stop and delete. So this would remove my instance that I created in that pool. I can stop it. I'm assuming this is a stop and deprovision, so I'm not getting charged for the CPU. This was something else I couldn't find in the documentation. I'm assuming this isn't just a shutdown, this is actually stop and deprovision.
Yeah, so just based on the way pricing works, that should be stop your VM to save money, not stop your VM to stop your VM kind of thing.
Yep.
So you're not charged when the virtual machines aren't running, but it's your responsibility to stop them when you no longer want to be charged for the compute. but like we called out earlier, you will be charged for the underlying storage. Like that disk persists, so the next time you boot the VM, it'll be in the same state that you left it in.
Yeah, exactly. And if you, as a project manager or you as an admin, want to go see the state that all of these are in, this is the other thing. This is where it's similar to lab services. Is I have a VM and all of that network and everything created in here, but I don't see it anywhere. It ends up being surfaced through the dev center. So if I go in, I think I created my other one in test project. I can go into it either through the dev center. So this is, we're going to go back to my Martha Stewart where I already created one. And I can go view the projects in here. I can go view my test project one. I can go look at my DevBox pools. And here is where you'll start seeing some of those DevBox definitions created. And I believe, if I remember right, once I go in those definitions, I can see uh, who has created their own VMs. So this is the
Gotcha.
only view I get of that VM. And again, I get the same options that I had in the DevBox portal where I can just stop and delete it.
But I guess that's good, like, from an admin side, like, if somebody left it on and you do wanna shut it down kinda thing, then
Yep.
it looks like you have that ability. And because you have the ability through the portal, that also makes me think that this is all available via the resource provider or the ARM API. So if you wanted to it looked like one of the things was maybe, like, automated stop start and scripting that out or having, like, a native capability. But if this is all just available via ARM and existing APIs in the resource provider, you should be able to script that too. So theoretically, you could have, hey, I want to start the VMs for all my devs at this time or all my QA engineers, whatever it happens to be at this time and shut them down also as a way to control like your costs and kind of your cogs if you're thinking about spinning this up for a bunch of folks.
Yeah, and that was one thing. If that, it would be nice if that was available because you're right. There's no way to configure any auto shutdown or auto boot for these dev boxes, either from an admin
Well, I think it's
perspective
just not
or
in
an
the
end
portal, but
user.
like I said, I bet if you just watched it with like a traffic sniffer, like a web, just to see like what APIs it called. Uh, for the most part, the portal is just an ARM expression generator, like an ARM template expression generator, or it's just issuing subsets of commands. So in that case, it's probably like a patch, like an HTTP patch over to the resource provider.
So I don't think we'll see if that dev box shows up in here yet. Oh, see, this is just I need to go into my projects to the cloud, dev box pools. I don't think I can even click on it. Yeah, it hasn't seen that yet. So again, I don't know what it does or why it takes so long. But once those all start spinning up, you will notice this is very cloud PC-ish. I can go ahead and open these up right in the browser, and it will take me, ironically enough, to
Oh, oh look at that.
windows365.microsoft.com,
Which is the cloud PC portal.
which is the cloud PC portal. Exactly. So I can go sign in. I need to go find my credentials.
And the sign in here, like, a little bit different than lab services where we provisioned a username and a password. Like, this is all just doing the AAD thing.
Right.
So
This
it's relying on
natively
on that
hooked.
capability.
Yeah, this natively hooked into my Azure Active Directory via where my subscription belonged without any configuration or me doing anything.
Interesting.
Um,
Question here, I don't know if you know off the top of your head. Does Oh, alright. So I was gonna ask if this supports Linux, like, back to the whole question of, what types of OSs, can you do server, can you do anything like this? So, I don't know if you can you do Windows Server in Cloud PC? Oh, you can only do
you
client
cannot.
over
You
there,
can
can't
only
you?
do client. So
Alright. So, prereqs for a dev box are the image version must also meet the Windows 365 image requirements. Has to be a Gen
Oh,
2 Hyper-V VM.
so you couldn't do this as a server.
No, so it has to be a Gen 2 Hyper-V VM. It has to be a Windows OS, not a Windows Server OS, and it has to be a generalized image. And if you use an image from the compute gallery that does not meet the Windows 365 image requirements, those images will not be listed for image creation. So maybe I was right in my assertion at the beginning, and where I was really
Yeah. Oh, my whole audio just went wonky. Are you there? Are you
I am
back?
here.
Okay. I have an issue with a dock, and every once in a while my audio disconnects. So, yes, you may have been very right in your initial assumption there. Um, it's like a pseudo Azure slash Microsoft 365. Um,
This is a it is a weird one to me.
yeah. So, and it gets a little bit more odd too because this is where it. We talked earlier too about how all these things surface, and even though we started at dev.microsoft.com, if we would go to like Windows 365.microsoft.com, it, I believe, shows up right alongside
Your cloud
my
PC.
cloud PC, which is right here. And I did notice this, so this is the other place I noticed it. If you configure remote desktop, this URL, rdweb.wvd.microsoft.com, API ARM feed discovery, is actually the endpoint, not just for Cloud PC, but also for Azure Virtual Desktop. So I shortcutted to the web version of this. But if you go to the web version, client.wvd.microsoft.com/arm/web client, this is my Cloud PC, this is an AVD environment, and this is a dev box.
Well, isn't that fun?
So as those other ones that are still provisioning show up, those will show up here. And not only that, but just a minute, I gotta go switch my screen share here a minute because I did not think about this. Let me go switch to my, oh boy, which display is this? Tertiary. I got it right. Um, if I go switch to my remote desktop client on my Mac, I get the same thing. So this isn't like a normal RDP connection under PCs. It shows up
Mhm.
under these workspaces where, again, I have my cloud
Yep.
PC, I have AVD, and I have my test dev center, um, my dev box. So it'll just show up right alongside all of my other ones, and I can go in, double click on it, log right into that dev box from there.
So funky.
It is. And I did not look at this. This might be, I'm going to go look at this a minute. Endpoint.microsoft. This should, I believe, also support all of the endpoint management, just like Microsoft
I mean,
365
endpoint
does.
manager was a requirement, so a licensing requirement. So I would imagine it should.
So I'm going to guess if I go look at my devices and my Windows devices, I probably have, I don't know which one it is. One of these is probably this. Let's go find out. This one. Open in browser. Connect. Hopefully it won't make me log in again. Oh, it does. To the cloud, to the cloud, to the cloud. Indulging. Sign in. It's my power. It's host name, right? PowerShell. Host name, this one is the CPC 58,
5B,
what?
558,
5B,
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 which is in
5B,
your list. Yep.
this one right here,
Yep.
that I am currently uncompliant.
That's the one.
So it automatically registered, and I have policies set up too. So it would go apply any compliance policies, configuration policies, Defender for Endpoint, all of that. So yeah, it sits in that weird middle where you definitely it's all Azure resources that you create. It's permanent billing like your Azure resources, geared towards devs, but then surfaced just like a cloud PC or technically just like Azure Virtual Desktop.
Like all of the above.
Yeah. But I can't see my ones that are provisioning in here. So I can only see ones that have been created in this endpoint. If I want to go see,
They have to be in a pool, it looks like,
right, they have to be
and
created and active in order to be surfaced in your web client, in Windows 365, any of those services. Oh, I have it open here. So, and as you can see, these, I think it took close to 60 minutes when I did this earlier today, when I was creating my earlier
it's
one.
weird. Like and especially since it shows up in the same workspace, like what is it doing in the back? But
You have got me. But that is DevBox. Again, to me, if you're doing some of that development stuff, and you don't necessarily need it always available, and you're okay to go in and start and stop it, um, from a pure cost perspective, I think DevBox makes a lot of sense. Now, if you forget that it's on and you leave it on all the time, it may end up being more. I don't know what the cost would be for 700. What it was 99 cents, right? Times is it 730, 720 hours a month. You end up close to $1,000 a month for that, right? You're essentially $1, $720.
mhm,
That seems really expensive compared to a
a little
Windows
bit.
PC that's like $60. So there you go.
And that's just the preview pricing. Who knows what happens when it hits
Yeah,
GA? But yeah, I mean, that is 99 cents per hour. So you're getting up there.
yeah, because it is. It's 730 hours, right? 24 times essentially 30,
Yeah,
720 minutes. That's
yeah,
a really
700
expensive virtual machine.
$720 times 9. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, you're 700 plus for a single VM on that lower one, and then you're 1400 ish
That
on the
doesn't
other
seem
one.
right. Is that really the
That
right pricing?
I That's what it says. Yes. So Microsoft DevBox is billed based on compute and storage consumption.
Here, we're
DevBox
switching over to
compute is
yours.
billed based on a per hour rate applied to an active usage of a given DevBox SKU. So that's it.
I feel like point. I wonder if that. Wow. Point nine
that that
nine point
that's
nine cents makes more that more closely aligns it with all your other VM pricing. 9.9 cents would put you at like $71 a month
it,
if it
it's
was
it,
always
it,
on.
it it's 0.99
I wonder if
per
that's a
hour.
typo.
I mean, that's the pricing page, right? So let's come in and pick a Windows. Let's pick like a like a DSV4, East US, 4 CPU, 16 gigs of RAM. Yeah,
Yeah,
140 a month there.
and that's not with hybrid licensing, I
Correct.
believe. Hybrid
That
licensing
that
will cut
that
that in
that's with the
cost and put
built-in.
it right
Yep.
around $70.
Yep.
I should leave this running since it's on a um, subscription that has credits and won't bill me $1,000. and actually see if it truly is 99 cents per hour or if they missed a zero in there.
I don't know. I mean, this is
That
the
just
public
doesn't seem
pricing
right.
page.
It is.
So,
It doesn't fit with the rest of the VMs of that size.
well, it's all that value add for having the dev center resource, of course.
Something like that. Sure. We'll go with that.
All right. Well, I think that takes us around the world with DevBox then.
It does. That covers it. So, with that, Scott, we need to come up with some new. We've like done all these virtual desktop options. We're gonna have to find something new to do next time.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. I have faith.
All right. Sounds good. Well,
All right. Thanks,
go
man.
stay safe. Don't blow away this week. And we will talk to you when we record the podcast on Friday.
Sounds good.